Okay, everybody, we're going over the RACES writing process and graphic organizer. So let's start with the first stage, which is the letter R. The letter R stands for restating the question. Now, this is different than rewriting the question, which we did in the pre-writing stage. So to keep that in mind. Okay, so once we establish what our questions are, we're going to need to restate them. You're going to restate the question by taking out the question words and starting a new sentence. There are a lot of different types of writing assignments, constructive response questions that your teacher may give you. The first kind is opinions, opinion persuasive. You have a lot of persuasive writings that you might have to complete. So an example of a persuasive writing is something like this. So in your opinion, which cinematic universe is superior, DC Comics or Marvel, and why? And this is the prompt example that I use throughout the video. So restating the question is simply starting the sentence. So in my opinion, that's all you need to do. We're not going to answer the question yet. That's the next stage. So then a narrative example. An example of a narrative writing assignment would be, what was the most interesting or exciting summer vacation that you have ever had? Tell me about it. You would restate the question like, my most interesting summer vacation was, and then in the next stage, we're going to answer the question, but not yet. Okay, so informational expository, that's kind of an informational writing. A lot of your constructive response questions or writing assignments are going to be structured like that. An example of that would be something like this. How has social media changed the lives of teenagers? You're just going to restate the question. So, social media has changed the lives of teenagers by, and we're not answering it yet. So that's pretty easy. We take the question words out and we start a new sentence. But what happens when your writing prompt isn't structured like a question? That happens a lot of the time. In fact, that's a lot of the writing assignments that I create. You have to find the questions, ask what the teacher is asking you, find the hidden questions in the pre-writing stage, and then answer those. So I have examples for that too. Many students love TED Talks, and there are a lot of great ones to choose from. Choose a tidbit of wisdom or insight from your own life and tell me what your TED Talk would be about. So there's not a question in that sentence. I'm going to restate the question like this. If I were to create a TED Talk, I would talk about, and then later I'm going to answer that question. Here's a second example. Imagine that we lost all electricity, water, and gas for a month without any time to prepare. Write about how your life would change and how you would survive. I'm going to restate the question like this. If my family and I were required to live without water, electricity, and gas for 1 month, there's not a question there. I'm not taking questions out, question words out. I'm just restating what I think my teacher is asking me. Okay, awesome. So then we're going to answer the question. So the first two letters together in this process help you form your main sentence. A stands for answer the question. We started a sentence in the last step. We're going to finish that sentence now. So some guidelines on this. Make sure that your answer to the question expresses a main idea or a point that you are going to prove. This is like if you were to boil down your answer to one sentence, it's going to be this one, because you answer the question. You can rewrite the sentence to sound better. You can also split your answer into more than one sentence. Okay, so we're going to take the questions from the last page. Which universe is superior, DC Comics or Marvel, and why? So we restated by saying, in my opinion, and now we're going to answer it. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is more superior than DC Comics. That's what I think. So that is what I am saying. Okay, second example. How has social media changed the lives of teenagers? If you remember, we restated by saying, social media has changed the lives of teenagers by, and now I'm going to answer the question. Making it easier to connect to their peers. All right, and our third example is, what was the most interesting or exciting summer vacation that you've ever had? Tell me about it. The most interesting summer of my life was when I was 11. Okay. Now what happens if there's more than one question? I say Frankenstein it. That's how I put it. So a lot of times, if there's more than one question, there's still a main question. Sometimes the other questions in your writing prompt are more about helping you answer the main question. So sometimes we have one main question, sub questions that we also have to answer, but doesn't mean we have to make a new paragraph for every new question. So that's kind of like that's where you get to sort of decide and structure it. So what I mean by Frankensteining it, your essay prompt has more than one question or requirement. You may have to stitch the different parts together to make it come alive, like Frankenstein. You might not provide evidence for each supporting question. You might not do the whole RACES process for every single question if there's multiple questions in your writing prompt. But I'll go through with you on that and how to figure that out. Okay. You must decide how you're going to structure your response. Sometimes your teacher will help you by giving you guidance or requirements, and in the pre-writing stage, you should have already figured out the requirements. You can create a separate paragraph for each question, or you can figure out how to answer both questions in the same paragraph. Okay, so going back to my graphic organizer that you guys are going to use, I already did the first 3 steps. I copy-pasted the writing prompt, I figured out my questions, and I figured out my requirements. Now it's time for me to restate the question. So I just used what I showed you in the video. I typed the part of restating the question, so in my opinion, and then I answered my question. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is more superior than the DC Comics Cinematic Universe. If you're following along with the writing assignment, this is the time that I want you to restate your question and then answer your question.